To turn with me in your Bibles to the book of Luke chapter 7, and I fully expect that as we continue on that God is going to do a work in your life and in mine. All of us are going to experience that together, so I'm excited to be able to share with you from Luke's account, Luke's story that he has preserved for us to understand the story of Jesus. Luke chapter 7, I'm going to start in verse 18. And I'm going to read through verse 22. Luke chapter 7, verse 18, and then we'll read through 22. It says this: the disciples of John reported all those things to him, and John, calling two of his disciples to him, sent them to the Lord, saying, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" And when the men had come to him, they said, "John the Baptist has sent us to you, saying, 'Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?'" In that hour, he, Jesus, healed many people of diseases and plagues and evil spirits, and on many who were blind he bestowed sight. And he answered them, "Go and tell John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, the poor have good news preached to them." I'm going to invite us to pray, but I'm going to do so differently. Don't close your eyes, don't bow your heads. I know, it's okay. Spirit of God, we invite you to teach us all collectively, my brothers and sisters, as we read your word. Help us to understand it, to apply it. May it change our lives. Amen? So for those of you who maybe have a short memory like me, John the Baptist, John the Baptizer, has not been a part of the story of Luke's gospel, since he was arrested in chapter 3 of Luke. And so to remind you, John, there is Herod the Tetrarch. Herod is the ruler of where John is. Herod, at a moment in life, says, "I don't like my wife as much. I would prefer my brother's wife." And so he leaves his own wife and then takes his brother's wife as his own. John the Baptist says, "Hey, time out, dude. That is not okay." Herod doesn't like that John did that, and so what Herod does is he throws John into prison. And so since chapter 3 of the book of Luke, John has been sitting in a dank, dark cell all alone with nothing but his thoughts. And so what we find in our passage is that his mood, his thought life have become pretty much dark and musty like the cell that he's sitting in. He's beginning to question himself. He's having second thoughts. It makes perfect sense. We all know that when life is going smooth, when things are going the way that we expect them to, it's not that hard to control our thoughts and our emotions. They're fairly even keel. But as soon as life goes off the rails, when circumstances are less than ideal, we have a little bit harder time controlling our emotions and our thoughts. Things spiral out of control, and it's welcome to the wonderful world of cranial confusion, I guess we could say. And so it's no surprise, if you read through the Bible, there are the most capable of Old Testament prophets who have weak moments when things are confusing. Military leaders of the nation Israel. We know from church history, whether it be in the New Testament or beyond the New Testament, that there are times where the most stalwart of saints have had moments of very difficult times where they fall into this trap of not really knowing which way is up. And it happens to the best of us, including me, and we become anxious, we become uncertain, we begin to doubt, we question, We can't keep our thoughts straight. We start to believe that things are true that are not true. We start to conjecture. We start to make things up in our minds. Our imaginations run wild. And usually when, at least I'm going to speak for myself, I'm guessing that it's true about you, when our imaginations run wild, they usually don't run wild to the best case scenario. They typically get sucked into a black hole of worst case scenario. Anybody been there? Okay. So can we just all collectively say yes? And so I think that's why, because of those moments in my life, as I think about those moments, and I think about how deep and how dark and how despairing they are, and I feel it, I remember it, I remember them. I think that's why John's question that he poses to Jesus tears at my heart when I hear it. Let me remind you of the question that John asked as he's sitting in his cell. The question that he's posing to Jesus. He can't get out of his jail cell, so he sends some messengers, he sends his disciples. They are going to communicate for him, and the question for Jesus is, are you the one, or should we look for another? Are you the one, or should we look for another? Let me remind you just how massive of a swing of the pendulum this is. We have just gone whoosh, and we could not go any further from where John started. Remember from where we started in Luke. Luke, before he's even born, his conception, his parents should not have been able to conceive a child, but there's this crazy angelic visit, and his mom conceives, and then so John has grown up since he was a little kid, and there was stories about, hey, there was this cool thing where your mom got pregnant and Mary got pregnant, and there was all these weird things that happened, and there was this fulfillment of prophecy, and there was these miraculous events, and all of these things with your birth and Jesus' birth, John. Family gatherings, they would tell the story. They would go, yeah, that's so cool, it's amazing. Yes, it's amazing. And then Jesus, when he begins his public ministry, John is the guy. John is the guy who's saying, prepare the way of the Lord. The Messiah is here. He's here, and it's Jesus. John is the guy who has the immense honor of baptizing Jesus. Can you imagine? They're in the river, and John says, I'm not worthy. Jesus says, yes, you are. And John baptizes Jesus. He goes under the water, comes out. The very Spirit of God descends. And there was some weird, crazy voice. I don't know how it worked, but the voice says, this is my beloved Son. What a moment. And now, John, are you the one? Or should we look for another? Are you really the one? Are you really the Messiah? Are you really who you say you are? And so for me, the question that I ask is how this pendulum could not have swung further all the way. John, how did you get to this place? I sounded like Jerry Seinfeld just then. How did you get to? Well, let me answer that question. Jesus doesn't seem to be doing what John thought Jesus would be doing. That's it. John the Baptist fully expected that Jesus would come in and the Roman government would be overthrown. And this invading army, the Jews in Jerusalem would be liberated. They're not liberated. He thought that the evildoers by now would have been smited more than they've been smited. Where is the smiting, Jesus? The evildoers are still doing evil. If you are God, if you are the Messiah, why aren't you doing that? Jesus, you said that you were going to set the captives free, and I am in a jail cell. And so here's what's true about John. Here's what's true about us. Here's what's true about you and me. It is a lot easier to trust Jesus when your idea of the whens and hows and whys and wheres line up with what Jesus does and when he does it and how he does it and where he does it. Isn't that true? Of course it's true. But when the when and the how and the why and the where doesn't, then we go, oh boy. It's unsettling. When your plans line up with his plans, when your timeline lines up with your timeline, of course, it's easy to believe. But when it doesn't, ooh. And so here's the question that put John into a tailspin, and I think it's the same thing that happens to us. As he's alone with his thoughts, I think the question that John, either he knows that he's asking it or he doesn't know that he's asking it, but regardless, I think he's asking it. Why isn't Jesus doing what I think he should be doing? Why isn't Jesus doing what I think he should be doing? Welcome to it's like what's the cartoon? Coyote. Thank you, Bugs Bunny. Yes. With our thoughts, that is. Here's something to remember. Here's a saying that hopefully you can take with you. I think it's on the screen. There will often be a vast difference between who I expect Jesus to be and who Jesus is. Between what I expect Jesus to do and what Jesus does. Be okay with that reality. This is reality. There will often be a difference between who I expect Jesus to be and who Jesus is. That's happening with John. It's happened throughout all history. It's happening today between what I expect Jesus to do and what Jesus does. Jesus is often perplexing. He often is surprising. Please hear me. This is both normal and good. This is normal. It's not unusual. It's normal and it's really, really good. Why, Donovan, is it normal and good? Let me tell you. Thank you for asking the question. I'm going to go back to the book of Isaiah, book of the Old Testament. Listen to what Isaiah the prophet says about God. Or what God says about himself. For my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Will you do an exercise with me for just a moment? Okay, close your eyes. Okay. All right, dig through their purses quick. I'm kidding. It's a joke. Okay, close your eyes. Okay, you're on earth. Elevate yourself beyond earth. You're looking back at earth. You're like International Space Station. See it? Little marble. Go back out. Okay, now turn around. The earth is to your back. Keep flying out. Go to the end of the Milky Way. All right, you're through the Milky Way galaxy. You're through our solar system. Keep going. Now, do me a favor and go to the end. You're not there yet. Keep going. Okay, you're traveling at the speed of light. Keep going. Keep going. Are you at the end yet? Okay, that's enough. If you don't know, that can go on and on and on. My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, how high are the heavens from the earth? That's pretty far. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts your thoughts. If that's true, and it's true, then what does it mean if Jesus, who is God, is exactly as I think he should be? If Jesus, who is God, does exactly what I think he should do, then perhaps what we have done is that we have created God in our image. What does it mean if the way and the will of God always perfectly aligns with my own? Well, maybe I've shrunk God. Maybe I've lessened God. Jesus should surprise us sometimes because his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. Jesus should occasionally challenge our assumptions because your assumptions are man-created assumptions. They are a product of your mind. And so if Jesus never challenges your assumptions, then either you've vastly reached some sort of point of divine omniscience, or maybe God has shrunk to conform to you. So Jesus should occasionally disagree with my expectations of him. And so that's why I tell you this morning that if Jesus sometimes isn't who I expect him to be and sometimes doesn't do what I expect him to do, that is both normal and good. I'm not God. You're not God. And because we are not God, there will be times where God acts in ways differently than I think that he should. That is normal and good. So one more thing that you might want to make note of. The way and will of Jesus may not be my way and my will. That's okay. The way and the will of Jesus may not be my way and my will. Now, should I desperately desire to know his way and his will? Yes. But because I'm not God, the way and the will of Jesus may not always be my way and my will. That's normal and good. So, what do we do in those moments? Because they are going to come. Some of you are there today. Some of you have been there recently. Some of you will be there soon. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. But what do we do in those moments of trial, of confusion, of despair, when our thoughts are spiraling out of control and we start asking, should we look for another? And maybe you don't ask that question, but maybe it's a related question. What do we do? I think we do what the passage encourages us to do. Remember, John is sitting in his prison cell, sends some messengers. Are you who you say you are, or should we look for another? And Jesus answers John's question, but not in a way that maybe we think we should. Normally when people ask a question, they give an answer, a direct answer. Jesus often doesn't give direct answers, and I appreciate that about Jesus. It's annoying sometimes, but I appreciate that. So the messengers come, they ask the question, and so what Jesus does is a bunch of miracles. It seems as though there's a string of miracles. It's like miracle here, miracle there, one more miracle, blind sight, deaf here, just boom, 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 miracles. And then he says in verse 22, let me remind you, go and tell John what you have seen and heard. Are you the one, or should we look for another? Miracle, 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 miracle. Go and tell John what you've seen and heard. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, the poor have good news preached to them. And in all of this, what Jesus is saying is, go tell John I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Go back and tell John I'm not off course, I'm not off track, I'm perfectly in control. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think the answer for us, again, the question is, what do you and I do when we are in this time of confusion and uncertainty? We do exactly what happened in this passage. We have to ask ourselves, me personally, what have I seen and heard? What have I seen and heard? When you, in your mind, are in the dank, dark, musty cell, and you're doubting, questioning the nature, the character of Jesus, what do? You have to. I have to. We must remind ourselves of what we've seen and heard. That is the way out of the darkness. That is the way for us to stop the spiraling. That is the way for us to, the thinking that has gone crazy and frenetic, it's a way to reel it in. And so we have to say, what have I seen and heard? We have to say, I know the stories of Jesus. I know the historical accounts of him doing miracles. I know that there have been hundreds and thousands of people who have testified to the work that he's done. I believe in what they saw and what they've heard. I believe in what I've seen. Most of us are here today because Jesus has done something in our lives. And we must remind ourselves of that work. I have to remind myself that when I was 16 years old, I was angry and I was confused and I was in utter despair, and somebody told me about Jesus. And when I gave my life to Jesus, when I was a 16-year-old young man, I knelt on my bedroom floor and the tears poured from my eyes when I finally understood the kindness and the goodness of Jesus. And I have to remember that from that moment, he took somebody who was in utter chaos and despair, and from that moment, quite definitively changed the entire trajectory of my life. I have no reason to be the person that I am, given my past. I have no reason to have the family that I do, given my upbringing. I have no reason not to be a drunkard, a person of anger and wrath, given my upbringing. I am not that person. It's because of the work of Jesus in my life. It's what I've seen and heard. What about you? I could give you story after story of moments where either my marriage, when my wife told me when we were early on in our marriage is over, and I said, "What?" And Jesus did a work when I was young and naive. I almost said we, that was stupid. I've seen Jesus navigate the immense trials of a son with autism and epilepsy, and him being our strength and our provision, with countless hospital visits and enduring the seizures, the strengthening from that. I've seen the work of Jesus. I've heard it. I could give you story after story after story of what Jesus has done in my life. Addictions that were removed, a change of heart when I felt bitterness and resentment growing, and somehow forgiveness and grace replacing that. I know what I've seen and heard. What about you? In fact, let me ask you, would you close your eyes once again? I'm not going to take you on a celestial journey this time. It's more of a spiritual journey. Would you in your own life this morning take a moment to think about what you've seen Jesus do in your own life? We so desperately need to remember what we've seen and heard. What have you seen in your own life? Hope for the hurting, the ability to forgive, supernatural understanding of spiritual things. Restoration of brokenness. What have you seen? You could open your eyes again. Were a lot of you able to think of something, I hope? Yeah. I've seen the work in your lives. I've seen God. I'm just going to scan the room. I'll try not to look at you directly when I'm mentioning. I've seen some of you who are single and lonely, and God give you a person in your life who you'd long for, and now you have a partner. I've seen you go through cancer and wonder whether or not it was the end of your life and God brought about healing in you, and now it's a past memory. I've seen you question your identity and who you were and whether or not a church family could love you because of that identity, and find that, yes, they do. I've seen you go through the loss of children and the despair that comes with that, and experience comfort and healing. I've seen you also battle cancer, maybe more recently, and navigate the tension of that, and to see God's faithfulness to give you hope and encouragement. I've seen you go through childhood trauma, horrendous war, and facing death itself. And for God to preserve your life. I've seen you face a debilitating disease. You never thought perhaps that you would walk again. Lots of time in the hospital and care unit, and now today you're walking, and it's something that people would maybe never know. I've seen you face loneliness, being a single mom, wondering if you could ever get through the day, make it through, and to have somebody come into your life that was not only loving to you, but loving to your kids. A great father that you'd hope for. Seen you wrestle with doubt in terms of faith, and for God to reveal himself to you to a place where you realize that the gospel of Jesus is true. I've seen you face addiction of various kinds, and now there's been a renewed story, a new story for you, where addiction is a thing of the past and you're a new creation. I've seen you lose your home through devastation and ruin, and to go through some dark times there, and God faithful to see you through. Those are just some of the stories that I know in this room. And I don't know all of your stories, but that's a lot of stories to know of what we've seen and heard. And so in these moments, when they come, let's not say if they come, but let's say when those moments come and it's dark and it's confusing and we go, are you the one? Let's commit ourselves to doing what's so important to do and remember what we've seen and heard. That's the way out. That's the way out of the prison of our mind. We have to do it. Can't think of a better way to end the morning than with a song that expresses our heart to Christ. So would you stand? And let's lift our voices together and declare what we have seen and heard.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my life I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire and darkest nights. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Sing that again. All my life you've been faithful.
And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. Yes, you have. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God.
Thanks for being here this morning. Let's go continue to declare his goodness. Amen. Let's tell the stories of what we've seen and heard. It's good for us to do. Blessings. Have a great day.